We're back for our first stream of the college football season. I've been pumping content. I have been doing collabs with just about every Nebraska channel that is out there. I've been anytime I get a tweet or a message on Twitter from someone asking me to come on their show, I'm like, absolutely. We've got to get the Kool-Aid flowing. We got to get excited. So today I decided we've got two streams for the week. The first one, we want to talk about my best bets for the season. This is overall college football, not just Nebraska. And then tomorrow we're going to do a Big Ten kind of preview, do all of our predictions for the entire season, and that'll be with college football with Sam. So now that we're officially, I guess it's 9 days away from the football season, from the Nebraska football season specifically, it's time we start getting back into it. And I decided my first guest to start the season off is going to be someone I'm really close friends with, someone who I talk to on the regular, someone who most of my conversations are in private, but I decided it was time to bring those conversations to light because Jake has been on our channel before. Jake he wouldn't call himself a Nebraska fan, but he is a Nebraska supporter. He's been to games with me. He has been rooting for Nebraska to win because he bets on them with me. And I decided that I'm going to give you a behind the scenes conversation of what he and I would normally have just on FaceTime for about an hour going over all of our preseason predictions. Bring it to you and let you see our insights into why we're putting our money where we are, because I am a big player. I like to watch and track everything throughout the entire season. I like to see which ones of my games and my predictions come true. So it's fun for me. I don't bet crazy. I bet within my means. And even if I lose, I still have fun doing it. So Jake has been doing a live stream on Twitch. He's called Snowman Picks. He has a Discord channel. He has a whole program running. He's essentially a professional gambler at this point. And because of that, I thought he'd be the perfect guest to have on our show. So let me introduce, for I think probably the 10th time on Corn Crazed, Jake Freud. And like I said, Jake is one of my really good friends. He's an expert. I can't speak to what he does as well as he can. So Jake, I want to take a second to let you explain your brand, what you've built now over the past couple years. You're wildly successful betting on sports. And I just wanted to give you that chance to let our Corn Crazed subscribers know what you've got going.
Appreciate that. Yeah, as you said, how we doing, Corn Crazed Army? I'm a loyal member with you guys. I watch all of Connor's videos. Yeah, as you said, I go by the username Snowman Sports. You can follow me on Twitter, snowman_sports. I also stream on Twitch pretty much every single day, talking about sports of the day, bets, baseball, basketball, football, college, professional, all of that. We do very, very well gambling. And yeah, come check it out. We have a lot of fun and we make a lot of money together. Good time.
So I've watched your streams before, Jake, and what it essentially is you go live just the same way I do. You share your screen and you tell people what your favorite bets are for that day. And the reason that it's interesting to me isn't just because you do that. It's because you consistently win. And Jake hit me with a $10,000 winning day the other day. He called me. He's like, man, I had a great day today. I was like, well, what's a great day? Because to everyone else, it could be $100 winner. It could be $1,000 winner. You never know. Each person has their own bankroll and what they're rolling with. Jake, how did you end up winning 10K in one day? What was the situation that went on? What were the picks? What were the sports?
It was all baseball, August 12th, the date that will forever live in infamy, 8/12/24. It was just four different pitchers. I believe it was Chris Sale, Brandon Pfaadt, Blake Snell, and one other guy I remember. But
I don't know any of these people anyway. I don't watch baseball.
Pitchers, they all needed to go, 2 or 3 strikeouts above their line. They all had crazy days. I had them parlayed together, round robin. It was just a miraculous day, a once in a generational betting day on baseball.
So you did all that with player picks, and it sounds like that's what I'm going to be getting into pretty soon here. I mentioned to Jake that I have a new sponsor for our channel. I've told you how important it is that we find partners who align with what our goals and values are, partners who want to drive our channel forward and help me to be able to sustain so that I can pump more content out for Corn Crazed. And I guess, Jake, now it's time to announce this year I am partnering with PrizePicks. So if you haven't heard of PrizePicks yet, it's a sports betting platform that you can hop onto and you can play by picking certain players who will perform based on a more or less performance baseline, I guess we'll call it. And I'm going to have the screenshot pulled up in a second here so I can explain and speak to it better with something in front of me. But I'm going to have Jake walk us through some of his strategies since he's won so much money betting on PrizePicks. And I want to share it with you guys because our corn crazed army took over another betting platform in the past. We all had wildly successful days, and I had some really good picks on that platform, and now I'm hoping to do it again on PrizePicks. So, Jake, before we move on to PrizePicks, I want to show one of your bet slips from there just to give people a little bit of insight into your success on the platform. I have all my buttons linked from last season, so hang on, let me do it manually. Screen share too. By the way, guys, bear with me. I'm resetting up all of my Stream Deck buttons with all of my new graphic packages. So I have to manually click things right now. And by next week, when we have our first pregame live stream, I think that'll be what, Thursday or Friday night, I'm going to have everything dialed in, locked away, and we won't be scrambling around trying to figure out what clicks to what. But this was a prize pick slip that Jake sent me. He picked more on every single one of these players last season. It was USC versus Oregon. Jake, how did you end up knowing that these guys were all going to go over in that game? And what was the final score? I don't even remember. This was back in November.
Yeah, this was a huge offensive game, as you might have anticipated, between USC and Oregon. As we know, last year, USC's defense had no D. It was really an offense, you know? They were just letting up big play after big play. And kind of my thinking with prize picks is they have, you know, a concept called correlation just in general, right? Which is to say, right, if Caleb Williams has a big game, then his receivers will also have a big game, right? Because if he's throwing the ball for 400 yards, then someone's got to be on the receiving end of it, right? So if you can pick out spots where you think teams are going to have big performances, you can stack multiple guys together in combos that are more likely to hit with each other and still get paid out. It's a really, really good system, I think, to try to get these correlated plays.
So if you know players who are going to have good days, or you have feelings on players who are going to explode, like I might have a feeling for Dylan Raiola to take off against Colorado, since they have a secondary that's strong to some degree, but an offense that could match and force Nebraska to throw it the entire game, I might want to take his more for passing yards, depending on what that's going to be. For all Corn Craze subscribers, if you use promo code CORN and you play $50, you play $5, you get $50 in promo instantly off of one $5 play. So it's a great offer to sign up and try PrizePicks. If you haven't done it yet, this is for new users only. So if you already have a PrizePicks account, all good. You'll be able to make some plays with us. But weekly, I'll be coming on here and giving you my best plays for the week. I'll be consulting Jake regularly, since he obviously has some big tickets and some big winners that he's constantly sending me. And now that I'm going to be more engaged back into football season, I'll have plenty of opportunities to make bets with you guys. But Jake, I want to move over to PrizePicks, and I want to talk about some of the plays for week one, because I'm just now getting into the app. I'm just now learning the interface, how it works. And because we're back to college football season, they have some of the lines listed up here. You've got the Georgia Tech and Florida State game. You have the SMU versus Nevada game. There aren't any Nevada players on here. It's all SMU, Florida State, and Georgia Tech guys. But what am I looking at here? Where am I trying to find value? And what's your kind of strategy? Because I know how I would play some of these, but I'm just interested in hearing what an expert would look at this as.
Yeah, so probably the main thing that you want to look at initially is, I mean, I don't want to say the main thing you want to look at is the popular tab, but right there, the very first thing you pop on in every sport is the popular tab. And you can see what people are betting on. And if you click in that upper left-hand corner, you see a little like bar graph symbol, right?
I see it right here.
Yeah, so if you click on that, it'll show you the most recent results from the last 5 games in comparison. So that's a good little tool to click on, and you can see kind of their recent performance and how they're doing. And I would say kind of the best way to go about it is maybe you want to attack certain teams from certain angles, right? Like we know last year, LSU had a horrible defense and they had a great offense. So those games were always shootouts. Same with USC. So we know, for example, that those would have been 2 teams last year that would have been good to try to take players in those games that'd be higher scoring. So if you can, find some guys that are, having good pace in these higher scoring matchups, and they've been hitting, more often than not, those are probably good guys to send your lineups around.
That makes sense. Well, something I've done before, I haven't played PrizePicks obviously in over a year, but I used to like taking kickers who I knew were consistent, would either need to kick field goals or would at least make the ones that they had to take. And a prime example here is the Florida State kicker, Ryan Fitzgerald. His more is 7.5 kicking points, his less obviously 7.5, which means if he makes 2 field goals and only 1 extra point, it's less. If he makes 2 field goals, 2 extra points, it's going to be more. I feel like Florida State is going to be in a position where they are going to kick some extra points, probably end up with a couple field goals, and I think 7.5 is a good number. So if I want that, I just click more, and I can add him to my bet slip. If I want to do the same with the Georgia Tech kicker, I can click more, add him in, and then behind Jake in my face right here, you can see that you've got 2 correct, pays 3x. So depending on what I'm betting, if I'm betting $5 on this, then I can win $15. So it's pretty simple how the setup works. But Jake, I actually want to make a play just because if I'm gonna introduce Prize Picks on this stream, I want to actually put my first slip in. So what do you like for this first game with Georgia Tech and Florida State?
Well, one of my favorite looks in this first game is the Georgia Tech quarterback Haynes King, but on the rushing yards. This is a guy who is a really solid quarterback. We know he was a 5-star recruit into Texas A&M, had to transfer down to Georgia Tech, sure, but last season he looked pretty good. Georgia Tech got a lot better as the season went along and was really on the back of Haynes King. Now, one of the big concerns as it comes to college football betting is we know that sacks count as negative rush yards for the quarterback. So whenever you're trying to bet on QB rush yards, definitely something to look out for. But if you click on King's bar graph stat, you can see that his numbers were huge. He had some in the 80s and even a 100-yard game, I think 6 or 7 towards the end of the season. And now in a spot against Florida State where they're 10-point dogs, they're likely to be losing. That means there's going to be a lot of pass plays called, which means there's a lot more possibility for scrambles if things break down, which generally we tend to see happen in college football games with teams, trying to catch up. If they got a fast quarterback, a lot of times it's easier. Just take 10 yards here, 10 yards there. So I think King looks pretty good with his skill, with his athleticism, and the game script in his future for rushing yards.
I like that. I'm going to ride the King, and then I'm going to take, I think, Preston Stone. Do you know anything about Preston Stone? He was SMU last year. He had a pretty good season. I think at some point he got hurt or wasn't playing a bit, but everything I know about him is that he can throw for a lot of yards. You have multiple games where he's thrown for over 200 against a Nevada team who I'm not expecting to be very good. I think that in this game they're favored by over 2 touchdowns. I would guess this is a coming out party for him. I kind of like taking more here. And if I do these two together on just one entry, $5 pays me 15. So I'm going to try this one out. I'm going to hit submit lineup. And let's see. It's that easy. I'm in the game. I got my first lineup submitted.
And I will tail that with you. I'll lock that in myself right now. Little two-piece action.
Well, we've only got one game really that we're focused on this week, or I guess 2. So I only want to make one more bet slip, and I want to save myself for next week when the college football season really gets going. But I think I want to take a kicker parlay, a kicker 2-leg play. So if I was going to take a 2-leg play, I would probably go more for the Florida State kicker. I would go less for the Georgia Tech kicker because I think Florida State's more inclined to kick field goals. I think Georgia Tech's more inclined to go for it. And I don't know if they're going to end up kicking 2 field goals over there at Georgia Tech. And I know for sure they aren't scoring more than 3 touchdowns. At least I don't think they're going to score more than 3 touchdowns. So I'm riding another $5 entry to pay 15. And we're keeping it light this week, Jake. I know other weeks will have multiple legs, just like you had in this six leg play with the Oregon and USC game. But I'm excited for this season. I'm excited to see what the future holds for me in Prize Picks because I've won money betting on individual games, but I haven't won as much betting on individual players since I just haven't tried it that many times. Jake, I want to pull up a couple quick comments really quick before we move on to talking about win totals and everything else. Husker Nation gifted us 10 Corn Craze memberships. So 10 random Corn Craze subscribers got their memberships reactivated if they weren't members already. Thank you, James, for supporting the channel. I appreciate you every year. He's always buying memberships for everyone. Jim, thank you for the $10 super chat. He says his prediction is 9-3, 6-1 at home. Jake, we're going to get into the win totals, and we'll talk about Nebraska a little bit, but I want you to get your head wrapped around what Nebraska is potentially going to finish at this year, because Nebraska fans want to know, at least from a gambling standpoint, what a professional would bet on in that spot. Gloom Trench, Tyler. Do you remember Tyler, Jake? So at the Colorado game last year, Tyler met up with Jake and I and Minnie and a few other friends. He brought me a bunch of Nebraska memorabilia, autographs, and he was awesome. He was cool to hang out with. We went to the bars. He was a good friend, and we're going to see him, or I'm going to see him when I go over to the Colorado game this year. Hopefully, I'm going to see a lot more Corn Craze subscribers as well once I'm out there. But now that we're getting towards season, I'm rekindling the relationships with everyone who I haven't gotten to talk to as much in these last few months, since obviously I haven't been making as much content. But kind of our show.
I do remember Tyler. It was a great time with you at that Colorado game. It was a ton of fun. I wish to be going with you to the game this year, but I'm going to be live every single Saturday morning this season on my Twitch channel. If you guys want to tune in for a pregame show. It's gonna be a lot of fun over there. Twitch.tv/snowman_sports.
That's where my friends all go to get their picks. They watch Jake in the morning. They set out their whole morning so that they can make all their proper plays. Then once they have all their plays in for prize picks and for straight bets on other games, they follow what Jake has to say, and then they go and watch the games like normally they would. So, Jake, I will be tuned in whenever I can to watch that stream. But now that we've locked down some player plays, I want to move on to future plays, which is win totals, national champion picks, Heisman's, and opening week lines. So I think we start off with win totals, if you're cool with that.
I'm down. I'm down to start with win totals. Do we want to talk Nebraska first or get into our picks?
Let's start with your picks. We'll go to Nebraska when I'm up because I actually do have Nebraska in my list. So for you, it starts off with Alabama at 9.5, and you're taking the over, which is plus 100 odds. Bet 100, win 100. What are your thoughts and what's the thinking here?
Yeah, so Alabama, 11-1 last year in the regular season. Remember, all these preseason win total futures only count the regular season games. So the SEC championship game does not count. Any playoff games they might make it to does not count. It's only the regular season games, of which virtually every team has 12. So Alabama can only lose 2 in order for them to hit this. And looking at their schedule, you might think it's a little bit difficult, right? They do play 5 preseason ranked teams, including Georgia, including Tennessee, Missouri, Oklahoma, LSU. Of course, they have Auburn, their biggest rival. And they lost Nick Saban. So a lot of things potentially working against them. They lost a lot of transfers. But I am so not deterred by what they lost, right? Because they brought in Kalen DeBoer, who I'm super high on as a head coach. He was the head coach of the University of Washington last year, led them to the national championship. The guy is an absolute offensive guru. He was the offensive coordinator at Indiana, leading Indiana to a top 12 finish in the country that one season with Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback there. He brought Penix to Washington, and I think he's going to make Jalen Milroe his new star quarterback. We know that Milroe is an insane athlete. He is strong, he is fast, he is big, and really the only concerns with him have been his throwing ability, right? That pass game, of which Kalen DeBoer is an expert. So I think we're going to see a big jump from Milroe, and Alabama still has 4 and 5 stars littered throughout the schedule. So basically what we're looking at is those 5 ranked games. They need to go 3-2. They get Georgia at home. That's their hardest one. I don't know. I think they can get it done. I really, really am high on them this season. I think they can go 11-1, if not 10-2.
I'm nervous. To get to 10 wins means they would have to win, like you said, 3 of these 5 or 2 of these 5. You have Georgia, South Carolina, Missouri, Auburn, OU, Tennessee, and LSU, all teams who I think are fully capable of beating Alabama. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to follow you on this one, but I like the thinking that Kalen DeBoer is an elite coach and that they have plenty of firepower, and this is probably a national championship caliber team once again, so totally makes sense. Another one you have listed is Kansas. Let's see what Kansas, or you have Arizona. Let's do Arizona before since they're right under. Arizona at 7.5 wins.
Yeah, so Arizona is a really fun team from last season. Ever since Noah Fafita took over as the starting quarterback, they really took a huge step from when Jaden DeLauro was there, right? They played, I believe, in their last 7 games, they went 7-0 with 5 ranked wins in that period. Now they return Fafita. They return their number 1 receiver in Teotaro McMillan, who is the number 1 returning receiver in the country in yards in Power 5. So they have that elite quarterback wide receiver duo, and now they're going to the Big 12, which is a pretty weak defensive conference. So they should be able to have, really, really strong offensive performances against everybody else. And their schedule is really, really easy. They play at Kansas State and at Utah. And even if you give those 2 games both losses, that's still 10-2 if they win everything else. And I think they're going to be favorites in literally every other game. The rest of their Big 12 schedule is not too difficult at all. They have an easy out-of-conference schedule. My only real concern with them is the fact that they lost their head coach. As we said, Kalen DeBoer took Alabama, while Arizona's head coach, Jed Fish, took over for him at Washington. But I'm a fan of the new coach, Brent Brennan. I think that he is, we liked him a lot at San Jose State. And I'm confident that they'll be able to get 8 wins here because, again, they have to lose 2 additional games besides those 2 ranked ones. And I don't really see it with the schedule with this firepower.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. I think the obvious setback is that they have a new coach. There's going to be a transition, obviously, on offense to some degree. They lost a few guys to the transfer portal who were studs. They went up to Washington. So there are question marks about them, and that's why the win total is so low at 7.5. But I do think this is still a team who will compete for 8 or 9 wins, and I'm going to ride that one. So Arizona's a good read in my eyes. You've got Virginia Tech, Let's see what Virginia Tech's at down here. They're at 8.5 for plus 120 odds. I do like Virginia Tech. Let's look at that schedule.
Yeah, Virginia Tech's another team that really excelled at the end of last season. Kyron Drones, again, he took over midseason, and the team was a lot better with him at the helm. Again, the ACC is a little bit down this year, all things considered, right? You've got Clemson, you've got Florida State as the clear top two. But then outside of that, Miami, NC State, and Virginia Tech themselves will be in competition for that, number 3 spot in the conference. Virginia Tech avoids Florida State. They do have to play at Miami and home for Clemson. But again, they could lose both those games and still be fine if they win everything else. I think this team is really, really strong offensively. They returned their number 1 running back in Vishal Tutton as well. And they have a great home field atmosphere in Blacksburg. So I'm high in Virginia Tech. They believe they have the most returning offensive production of any team in the country. All 3 of their top receivers return. Drones returns. Their number 1 running back returns. A lot of great talent here. This is a program on the rise.
Yeah, I think the key, like you said, they can afford to lose 3 games. So let's say they lost to Miami, they lost to Virginia Tech. They can afford to lose to either Rutgers, Syracuse, or Duke. And I think they'll go 1-2 in those games, or 2-1 in those games, sorry. So I like riding that one as well. The last one you have is UCLA. Where is UCLA on our list? They might not be on this list. I don't know why. I don't see them. Well, what is the win total for UCLA? What were you seeing?
That is weird they're on there. I see 4.5 for UCLA, and this is a rare under that I'm taking for win totals. I just think UCLA is in too much of a state of disarray. Right? They lost a lot of talent from last year. They lost their best overall player, Latu, on defense. They lost Dante Moore, their 5-star quarterback. But most importantly, they lost Chip Kelly. I mean, this is the first. I mean, you and I have followed college football a long time. Can you ever remember an active sitting head coach actively leave for a offensive coordinator job? I mean, and again, we're not talking about like a North Dakota State to USC. We're talking about a UCLA head coach going to another school here. So it's just such an insane situation that he's willing to leave. I know it's somewhat personal reasons, not necessarily the state of the program, but he has left the state of the program in flux. The schedule is very difficult now moving to the Big Ten. They have the most travel of any team in the country this season. I just don't like their roster. I think their new head coach is in over his head. They promoted their running back coach. I think it's going to be a very tough season for UCLA here.
That's fair. I do think UCLA's got top-heavy talent. I think that their first string is pretty good. I just don't know if they have any depth, and their defense is going to be a lot worse. William says Arizona is not a football school, and Heroes of the Scape says he'd argue they're not a football state. It's so interesting because Arizona's got ASU, they've got Arizona, and they've got the Arizona Cardinals. So right now, they aren't a football state because all of those teams aren't very good, right? But in the past, Arizona's been a football state for sure. They've had good ups and downs, and right now, Arizona at least is on the rise. I don't know how long it'll last, but it's a football state. What do you think, Jake?
I mean, just because they have a lot of teams doesn't necessarily make it a football state. I think part of it is due to the passion, right? Because Nebraska only has one team. They have no pro team, but they're certainly a football state. And I feel like a lot of people who live in Arizona aren't necessarily as diehard about football.
See,
I do kind of agree with that.
My experience in Arizona is that everyone who I've hung out with there loves football. They might not be Arizona State football fans like the ones who live in Phoenix, or they might not be Arizona fans or Cardinals fans, but they all love football. That's what my experience is. There's a lot of great bars to go to. Keep in mind, my threshold is so low because I live in California where no one watches football. I actually saw this heat map pop out. The heat map that I saw pop up on Twitter showed that no one in California, period, watches football outside of like this small area in Fresno, which is in the middle of the state. But LA, no one cares. So my perception is skewed because of that. Max brought up that he likes SMU under 8.5. SMU moves to the ACC this year. They're going to have to play Florida State, Louisville, Duke, and Cal. Well, yeah, Cal. That's a new team in the ACC. Out of conference, they got to play BYU and TCU. I think the schedule's pretty weak, all things considered. But when you're talking about a team who just came from the AAC, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I don't hate the underlook here. I mean, it's certainly a massive step up in competition. So I don't know if we can say like, well, they had a top 25 offense last year and they were top 10 in points. Well, they absolutely were. But as you said, they're going against much different teams this year. So I don't hate that look at all. They do have Preston Stone returning. He's an experienced quarterback. they might have some potential with them. Again, we've seen teams like Tulane be able to compete against, the big time schools out of that group of 5. But I'm okay with the under here. I don't have a strong feeling towards the over at the very least.
Yeah, I don't have a strong feeling towards the over. I think TCU's a rivalry. BYU's always a choppy team. Florida State, I think, will beat them. Louisville on the road, I think, will beat them. I don't think there's that many games here that are gimmies. Every single one outside of who's HCU. At first, I thought it was UConn, but I don't even know who that is. Holy Cross?
Is that Holy Cross?
I don't
think
know.
Holy Cross.
So any one of these games they could lose. I like Max on the under.
Right, it's Houston Christian. Okay.
Houston Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And then Big Ten Quick Talk says he likes 9+ wins for SMU. So it's a toss-up. I think I like the under here. DFS says, I'm in Phoenix, lots of football fans, but much more baseball fans here. I can see that. And Andrew says Kansas over 8, which did we talk about Kansas?
We did, yeah. Oh, no, we didn't talk about Kansas. We did not talk about
Let's
Kansas.
go talk about Kansas because you really like them. I like them too. Let's see what they
do. Kansas is actually the only team that I left off this list that I really, really, really like, only because I set 4, not 5. But love Kansas this year. Similarly to Virginia Tech, they have a ton of returning production. Their top 2 running backs, Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw, are returning. Their top 2 receivers, Lawrence Arnold and Luke Grimm, returning. Jalen Daniels, their stud quarterback. He missed a lot of last season injured, but he is back. Lance Leipold is back. I think a lot of us are surprised that he's been staying at Kansas this long, but the fact they bring everybody back, they've been continually on the rise. A beautiful, beautiful schedule in the Big 12. They avoid Arizona. They avoid Utah. They avoid Oklahoma State. They really only have to play Kansas State. That's a tough team. And if they lose that, they could even blow 2 other games here randomly, which I don't really expect them to. I think Kansas is a beautiful over 8 wins. I think that they have a shot to make the playoffs as a long shot. And I think if everyone stays healthy, Jalen Daniels could even threaten for the Heisman if everything goes right.
Yeah, they return both first-team all Big 12 corners. So there is a lot of talent on that team all over, a lot of guys who are going to play in the NFL. It is concerning to me that the total's so low. What does Vegas know that we don't? And I'm guessing the only thing that they're basing this off of is that they lost their offensive coordinator. I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's that, and their home stadium is currently under renovation. So they're playing all home games. They're playing all home games at the Kansas City Chiefs arena this year.
Yeah, that could be a factor as well. All right, well,
but I think that their home schedule is honestly nice enough that I'm not really giving that a huge, deterrence. And I don't think that that Arrowhead is too far from campus, so they should be fine.
Yeah, it just won't be the same college football environment. Playing in an NFL stadium is nothing like college football environments. John wants to know about Kansas State. Kansas State's total is at 9.5. They're actually projected to either win the Big 12. It's either them, Utah, or Oklahoma State. What do you think about Kansas State this year? They've got Avery Johnson now in his first year of full-time duty. You have Gideon, is that his last name? The running back. You've got Donovan Edwards. Was that his name? Donovan Edwards? I can't even remember his first name now that I think about it. No, not Donovan. That's the Michigan running back.
No, that's Michigan. Yeah, Dylan Edwards.
Dylan Edwards. Both starts with a D.
Right.
Confuses me. And then they've got a tight end who's a stud. Not sure about their receivers, but they're typically pretty feisty on defense. Kansas State, 9.5 wins. Too many or too few?
And we really like their coach, too, Chris Klieman. We talked about him a bunch before. This is the former head coach of that North Dakota State dynasty. He was Carson Wentz's head coach. He was Trey Lance's head coach. This is a guy who has been very, very, very experienced, and that success has continued right along into Kansas State. I think the 9.5 is a little bit more concerning for me than a couple other ones. They have to play Arizona, Oklahoma State, and Kansas. Now, granted, they do get all 3 of those at home, which is a huge benefit. But they also have to play at Tulane, which is a tricky out-of-conference schedule. And then because some of their road games are quote-unquote easier, how many times this season do we see teams blow, road games against teams that they should beat? We see it all the time in college football, big upsets, field storming. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think we're probably due for one for Kansas State this year. I think they're going to have a good season. I just don't love this 9.5 number. They're only allowed to lose 3 games. Excuse me.
Yeah. To be honest, this is
only 2 because 10-2 is the number they did, so they only can lose 2 games here. I don't love it.
This is ugly, and I'm going to tell you why. Their road games are all against tough opponents. Tulane, tough opponent. BYU, tough opponent. West Virginia, another team who could surprise everybody and win the Big 12. Colorado, say what you want to say about them, but they are a tough opponent to some degree. Houston, if Kansas State's ranked going into Houston, that could be a night game, could get rowdy, could be a game they lose. And then Iowa State, another team who has been surging. So I think they could lose multiple games on the road, and then they're not even guaranteed to win all their home games, playing Arizona and Oklahoma State. Oh, and Kansas all at home. So I hate the over. I actually think I might play the under with Kansas State. Although I do love Kansas State, I'm rooting for them, and I think Kleiman's a great coach. I don't like their situation. Okay, some that I like: Michigan State at 4.5 for -150 odds. I love Michigan State's schedule. So there was a quote that came out, or I guess it was a video. It was from the quarterback, Aiden Childs. He's the transfer in with Jonathan Smith. Keep in mind, Jonathan Smith's a fantastic coach. He was great at Oregon State. He really built their program up. He had them looking like a Pac-12 contender back-to-back years. And they had some slip-ups that made them miss the championship, but they still finished ranked both years. This team plays Florida Atlantic, Maryland, Prairie View, and Boston College to start the season. That's 4 games where they're either going 3-1 or 4-0. Maybe Boston College and Maryland both beat them. I think it's slim chances. So if you end up 3-1 in that situation, you finish the season after you play 4 ranked teams with Indiana, Illinois, Rutgers, and Purdue. 3 of those games are at home. Win 2 of those, and they hit the over. So I think they win all 4, potentially. I don't think Michigan State's an elite team, but I do think they're going to play sound, disciplined football. I think they have a lot of good transfers in, and I just think 5 wins is almost a given with these guys, although they are going to go likely on a 4-game losing streak right in the middle of the season. So that video I was talking about with Aiden Childs, the specific quote was something along the lines of take the over, and I'm going to listen to him and take it.
I'm for sure listening to him on the over too. I think the thing with Michigan State, as you said, they have that brutal 4-game stretch where they probably have to go 4-0 beforehand to hit, because even afterwards, we don't know how they're going to hit up.
No, they can go. I think they can go 3-1. 3-1's fair because those last 4 games are all winnable.
They are all winnable, but you also have to remember that's a huge grind that they're going to lose a lot of probably like motivation when you have such demoralizing. That's a month straight of losing.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to pick themselves out. Now, I do think they will, because I'm a big fan of Jonathan Smith as a head coach. And the 4.5 number does seem low, but Boston College is not bad at all. Maryland is not bad. It's going to be close, but I would lean towards the over because of Jonathan Smith.
Yeah. Okay. We're taking the over, both of us. An under I like is LSU. LSU's schedule is tricky. They've got to play USC across the country to start. Then they've got to play Ole Miss at Arkansas. They get Alabama at home, but that's a team you think could win the national championship. They play Texas Tech on the road, Florida on the road, and then Oklahoma at home. Their win total is 9.5, which means they need to win 10 games. I love the under. It's kind of heavy juice at -170, but it feels like LSU's in an under position for me.
Yeah, I am not a big believer in Garrett Nussmeier, their new quarterback, replacing Jaden Daniels. They lost Malik Neighbors. They lost Brian Thomas. That is a ton of talent on offense that they need to replace. SEC is a huge grind this year. I kind of agree with you on this under.
Okay, we're taking this. Comments brought up by Cole. He said KSU's offensive coordinator Optimus Klein went to A&M. That is true. Their OC went to A&M. So you've got Kansas State, who already has a daunting schedule, now loses their OC, and they're going to have a little bit of transition. New quarterback taking over full time. That makes me like the under even more.
Yep.
Jim says Michigan State way over 4.5. Jonathan Smith is in the hunt for Big Ten Coach of the Year. Aiden Childs is in the hunt for all Big Ten quarterback. I don't know how much I agree with Aiden Childs being an all Big Ten quarterback. However, I do think he is going to be good. And in the future, he could potentially be. Last year, he was much more of a game manager, given he was playing in a system that only required game manager roles. But yeah, I mean, I like Aiden Childs, just not sure how great he's going to be.
I mean, I like Aiden Childs too, but Big Ten quarterback of the year is a stretch. The guy has never really had significant playing time in college football before. And when he did, it was in the Pac-12, not in the Big Ten, with much better defenses.
Yep. Okay, Husker Nation says, thank you for the $10 super chat, by the way, James. He says, how would you rate Dylan Raiola among the new QBs in the Big Ten? So let's do a little side tangent right now with you, Jake. Let me see what I'm going to do. Big Ten football conference teams. We're going to pull up every team. We can go through all the quarterbacks this
Sure.
way. And then I want to know what your thought is. I've already ranked him, but let's get your
Mhm.
thought. So, would you, and we'll do this based on if you were a head coach of a Big Ten school and you were going to take a quarterback. Okay.
Sure.
What is
For
this?
this season only, because obviously, like Rayola's
This
got probably more upside than everybody.
this season alone, if you're drafting
Right.
your team right now and you have to pick pieces from all of these schools, who are you going to choose? So,
Sure.
Altmaier or Dylan Raiola?
Allmeyer did end the season pretty good, but I would go with Rayola. I think that he's got a lot more athleticism, a lot more star upside. I would stick with him over Altmeyer.
Okay. Altmaier's a 50% passer who had multiple interceptions last year, looked like a mess and got benched for the backup. I'm absolutely going Raiola. Altmaier, in
But he
my
was better at the
opinion,
end of the season.
doesn't matter. In my opinion, he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and it's not even a question. Okay. Next is Rourke at Indiana, your favorite school.
I'm an Indiana Hoosiers alumni, of course. Go Hoosiers. Um, Curtis Rourke is a fifth-year senior. He's a former MAC Conference Player of the Year.
Yep.
The guy is super experienced. I would definitely take Rourke this season over Rayola. Obviously, long term, I think Rayola is a better pick, but just this year, I would take Rourke.
Rourke is really experienced. I think these guys are kind of tied. I think both of those quarterbacks match up really well if you're going to draft a team, and I think they match up well with the rest of the Big Ten. I think obviously Raiola is more of an explosive passer, but Rourke is more experienced, and maybe that counts for something. How
I mean,
about
we saw last year with Nebraska the turnovers, and one thing about Rourke is experience. He's going to cut down on the turnovers for sure.
you would think? How about Cade McNamara?
Cade McNamara, he's on Iowa, which already is going to sink his offensive potential. He wasn't super impressive at Michigan either. He's coming off of an ACL injury. You got to go Rayola here over Mac.
It's not even a question. Cade McNamara is a bust. Even Iowa fans are saying it. So yeah, McNamara is not anything. I'm not even going to second guess this or talk about it anymore. McNamara's done. The quarterback for this team, Maryland, is Billy something. It starts with a T. Let me figure out what his name is because I can't remember. QB. Billy Edwards Jr. So, did he start last season? Let's see. Billy.
Not for Maryland because they had Tua's brother.
Yeah, they did. Are you taking a shot with Billy Edwards, whose stat line from last season was 10 of 30 for 33%, or are you going with Raiola?
I would probably go with Raiola. I mean, Edwards doesn't have enough experience. He only played in one game that he had any significant playing time in that Northwestern game, in which he was, 166 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 4 sacks, ran for 66 yards. I guess that's not too bad.
Okay.
But I would definitely stick with Raiola over Edwards.
Okay. College Football with Sam is now informing me that MJ Morris is going to be the starter for Maryland. And
the transfer from NC State.
That's what I originally thought was going to happen. But then I was reading that he
Yeah.
wasn't going to be, that it was going to be Billy Edwards. I like MJ Morris better. He's a dual threat QB.
For sure. I liked him at NC State last year.
Yeah. What are you thinking? Are you thinking MJ Morris or Dylan Raiola?
That one is also close because while Morris looked good at NC State, again, he had kind of limited playing time. He was still behind, I want to say it was Grayson McCall.
Brennan Armstrong.
Brennan Armstrong. It's McCall this year. So, he does have a little bit more experience than Raiola, and they are kind of, I don't want to say similar style, but I think they are a little bit similar style. So I would still give the edge to Raiola with the natural athleticism and talent.
Well, I think Morris is a lot more athletic. I wouldn't say they're similar in style in that way, but I do think that Morris is decent. I would still take Raiola over Morris. Okay, Aiden Childs at Michigan State or Raiola?
Yeah, so Childs has the speed. We've seen a lot of potential from him as well. He's another, top quarterback prospect. I think I would lean with Childs this year only because we've seen him have some explosive games in the past last season.
Okay, I would probably still lean Raiola here. I think this is a situation where you rank Childs ahead of Raiola, though. I agree with you because he was pretty good last season. He's already proven it in college, and natural athleticism is through the roof. College Football with Sam back with a follow-up. He says, you are right. Edwards is now the starter. My bad. Okay, so it would be Edwards versus Raiola, and yeah, I would say Raiola. Real quick, James, who's been a member for 23 months, which is damn near 2 years, said, bold prediction, Huskers go +5 on turnovers. Last year they were like -17 or something, Jake. Do you think that they can get to that plus ratio, or do you think that Nebraska ends up in the negative again?
I would think that turnover differential is the number one focus of Nebraska's offense this season. Honestly, more so than even, big plays and scoring points to a certain extent, because if Nebraska just eliminated the turnovers last year, they probably have 8 or 9 wins. They win a lot more of those games. There were so many games last season that they lost in the fourth quarter off of one possession, off of turnovers. So I would imagine that the offense is like going to be a little bit more conservative in that aspect, saying like, Raiola, we're making sure that you're holding onto the ball, you're not throwing picks. Take the deep plays if they're there. +5, I think, is a good goal, right? You guys have a really, really good returning defense, a lot of stud players there, but with a true freshman quarterback, he's going to make some mistakes. There's no doubt about that. I think it's possible if the defense is strong and if Rule really makes it a focus, like we are going to eliminate turnovers at all costs.
Possible, unlikely, but I like James' enthusiasm. How about Alex Orji? Alex Orji or Dylan Raiola?
Well, if it were college football 25, definitely Orji. They made him an unbelievable guy in that game for some reason. But in real life, I'll stick with Raiola. Orji has not impressed me at all in real life from what I've seen from him. He's obviously fast and strong and athletic, but if you don't have an arm, you don't need to have a good arm to hand the ball off in Michigan's offense. That's all they're going to do anyways. But I bet you Raiola could hand it off just as well as Orji can.
Yep, agreed. Max Brosmer at Minnesota.
Yeah, don't know much about him. I definitely am going to stick with Raiola here.
Yep. Northwestern. Oh man, I need college football with Sam for this one. Northwestern depth chart. I don't even know who their quarterback is. I need to get my memory refreshed.
Is it Sorsby still? Is he still there?
It is Mike Wright, who's from Vanderbilt.
Oh, from Vandy? From Vandy. Dude is fast as shit. That's for sure.
Is he? Is he a problem? 6'4", 200?
Yeah, he is. He's pretty fast. He had a couple big runs last year. He didn't, he kind of split time with their other quarterback last year. I think his name is AJ Swan, if that's correct.
Correct.
And he was kind of used more as the running guy. I actually we liked Northwestern last year. We were incredibly impressed by the job that David Braun did taking over from Pat Fitzgerald and all that. I think you and I projected them to go like 1-11 last year, legitimately on this show, and then they actually made a bowl game, and I think they won the bowl game too. So
they did. They beat
with a good coaching staff, a guy who's a stud, like with speed like Mike Wright. I think they'll use him well, but I would still stick with Raiola. I don't think he has the passing ability to get it done in the Big Ten.
Okay, these next three I think we can say are above Raiola on this list, but then you get down to Purdue.
You know what? I don't know if I'm willing to say that about Drew Aller. I think Drew Aller looked horrible last year.
He did, but I think with the right offensive coordinator, and I think he has it right now, I think Drew Aller's going to look a lot better. But I do think it's a toss-up again. I think it's a toss-up. How about the Purdue quarterback, Hudson Card?
Yeah, transfer from the University of Texas. He played really well against Alabama 2 years ago in that game where Quinn Ewers got hurt. And that game that ended up costing Texas a chance at the playoff. But he didn't really impress me that much on Purdue. I think he made some good plays, but I would definitely stick with Raiola over Card.
Fair. And then Rutgers is going to roll with Ethan Kaliak-Manis from Minnesota.
Yeah, Kaliak-Manis is a really underrated guy. I think Rutgers is a really underrated team heading into next season, right? Greg Schiano has a history of winning in the past. They played really tough-nosed defense. They were one of the best defensive teams last year. And now adding an upgrade at quarterback, I think Rutgers is going to be a very sneaky team. Kaliak-Manis, I might take him over Raiola slightly for the same principles of like, he's just been around a long time. He's had a lot of experience in the Big Ten. He's going to know what to look out for. He's going to know the mistakes to avoid, but it's very close.
These last four, I think, are all better than Raiola at this point. Although you could argue that Tyler Van Dyke isn't. I just think in a new system, he should be better. So answering the question that we were asked earlier, I think Dylan's better than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think he's better than 8 quarterbacks in the Big Ten right now, which would make him number 10 in the conference?
Something like that, yeah.
So whoever asked the question earlier, Raiola, number 10 in the conference right now to start the season. I think I have him ranked 7th in a video I posted. but there was some speculation in that video as to how he would do. This is more so just based on raw talent and what he's already shown in practices and what we know about him. So keep in mind, we talked a lot about these quarterbacks last year for Nebraska, and we were wrong about all of them. So, well, there's only one quarterback. We were wrong about the one quarterback that Nebraska had, and the coaches hyped him way up for no reason. So that is that. Let's move on to the Nebraska.
But also keep in mind, right? Like Julian Sayin is a 5-star quarterback at Ohio State. If we were talking about him instead of Raiola, he might be dead last on this list. You know, so like Raiola is still head and shoulders above a lot of the other freshman quarterbacks in the country.
Yep, that's true. I think there's no way to deny that. At 7.5, let's see where Nebraska's at. Nebraska, you get, I don't know, it's minus odds for the over. So let's say you're taking the Nebraska over at minus 130.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like about the schedule? What don't you like about the schedule to get to 8 wins?
I mean, first of all, what's not to like about the schedule? We saw that Nebraska, I think last year they actually had a pretty easy schedule too. But this year it's like they have Ohio State, USC, and Iowa. Iowa's their big rivalry game, so they're going to have them every year. But they avoid Michigan, they avoid Penn State, they avoid Oregon, they avoid Washington, they avoid a lot of these top teams coming into the season. And the early part of the schedule where Raiola is going to presumptively struggle the most is the easiest part of the year, right? UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana. There's a very reasonable chance that they will be favored in every single one of those games. I mean, Colorado is probably the toughest test, and they're already 6.5-point favorites. And, you know, we've been talking about this literally since the last Colorado game that we'd like Nebraska to have a huge revenge spot here.
I like it.
So I think that Nebraska is looking pretty good. Even if they drop, they could probably drop 1 or 2 of these early games, which I don't even know that they will, and still get wins over UCLA and Wisconsin, potentially even Iowa at the end of the season to cover up for it. I think 8 wins is where I'm looking for Nebraska based on their great defense returning, solid freshman quarterback, a lot of potential, and really solid schedule. I would look at 8-4 for Nebraska.
So you're taking the over?
I would take the over at 7.5, yes.
Yeah, I think the over, we want to bet the over every single season because we're Nebraska fans, right? But I think this year it just makes sense. I think 9 wins is in the cards. It's actually something that Nebraska can get to based on the talent they have on the roster and the coaching now that matches up with the talent. They aren't going to make all these same stupid mistakes. You wouldn't think. So love the over at 7.5, even though it's minus odds. Bart asks who we're with. Bart, we're with Jake Freud. He's a professional sports bettor, and he has his own live stream. He is called Snowman Sports on
Snowman Sports on Twitch. Yes,
on Twitch. Twitch is what it is, and Twitter.
Twitter Snowman_sports. Twitch, there's no underscore.
There you go. So Snowman Sports is a professional gambler. I introduced him in the show for having just won $10,000 on a few slips last week on player props. So
yeah, on all my tracked baseball picks, we're up 75 units on the season. So if you average $100 a bet, you'd be up $7,500 on my picks. To join $200 a bet, $15,000.
To join Jake's Discord, how much does it cost?
$50 a month. There's a link in my Twitter bio. It's called Beat the Books. There's not just me. There are about 12 to 15 other cappers in there. Every single sport is covered from all angles: money lines, spreads, props, parlays, lottos, builders. We got it all, and a really good community to talk sports and enjoy sweating out our bets with.
There you go.
In fact, I have a bet right now pending to win another couple grand that needs one more strikeout from Spencer Arrighetti. I'm not so sure he's going to get it, though. I think they might pull him here at the end of the 5th.
Well, there you go. Huddle Highlights asks if I'm going to any other games outside of Colorado. I'm going to release my entire schedule. I'm only going to 2 Nebraska games this year, only 1 Nebraska home game, and I'm going to 8 total football games for the season. But I'll release my whole schedule for the season next week, but only 1 game in Lincoln. Let's see here. We're going to move on to Heisman odds. I just want to get your thoughts here real quick. You talked about your favorites being Jalen Milroe, Noah Fafita, and Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards has the lowest odds out of all those guys.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say Edwards is like my number 3 top pick, but in terms of the odds, I really, really like him. We can start off talking about him.
He has the exact same odds as Dylan,
which just seems absolutely crazy. I mean, first of all, in order to win the Heisman this year, I firmly believe you have to make the playoffs, right? There's now 12 teams making the playoffs. Last season, the last few years, there was 4. So if you missed it, you could still have the stats to make up for it. But now there's so many spots available. I find it very, very hard to believe that we can have a Heisman Trophy winner who did not make the playoffs.
Agreed.
So now you look at the University of Michigan. They're the reigning national champions. They went undefeated. Yes, they lost J.J. McCarthy. They lost Blake Corum. They lost Jim Harbaugh. but they still have one of, if not the best defenses in the country. And we've seen Donovan Edwards in the national championship game show all his skill and all of his speed. He had over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, Sharon Moore is the new head coach of the University of Michigan. He took over for 3 games last year when Harbaugh was suspended. In those 3 games, he ran the ball at a 66% rate, higher than 2 out of every 3 plays was a carry. And the vast, vast majority of those was to Blake Corum. This is a head coach who wants to pound the rock. He wants to feed it to the lead back. Now without Corum, the field is wide open for Edwards. If Michigan makes the playoffs, let's just say Michigan wins the Big Ten and is the number 1 seed in the playoffs. That is not out of the realm of possibility, right? They did it last year. There's no reason why they couldn't do it this year, beating Ohio State. They beat them 3 years in a row, right? If they do so, it's not going to be Orgy winning the Heisman. It's not going to be Mason Graham winning the Heisman. It's not going to be Will Johnson. It would be Donovan Edwards. So for those odds, I think it's insane.
I agree with that. I like it. I like him a lot better than playing Raiola when you talk about it from that perspective. You talked about Noah Fafita, plus 4,000 odds over there at Arizona. Another team that would have to make the playoff, but you think they could do it?
Yeah, it's another similar situation where I think it's good odds for the chance. I do like Arizona as a long shot to make the playoffs. I think they have a great schedule. And Fafita has the best receiver in the country in McMillan. So, when you're throwing to the best guy, he had great stats last year. Fafita, he didn't play the whole season. He only played about 2/3 and still had over 2,700 yards. Let me pull up the exact stats right now. Seconds.
I love that you speak to the exact stats.
Well, I want to, it's easy to pull up. Let's see. I'm on basketball. Okay, never mind. I'm on the wrong page. But either way, he had great stats last year, good touchdown to interception ratio. And now he's going to take another step forward with a stud receiver in a decent schedule and a good conference. I think it's a really solid opportunity for Fafita.
That's fair. I've got 3 that I like. So I totally am on board with Fafita. I'm on board with Jalen Milroe, which is another one you mentioned. I think that one's obvious. We don't even need to talk about it.
We don't need to talk about that.
But the ones I like the best are right here at plus 1,400, right there next to Jalen Milroe. Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, same reasons. He's going to play in a lot of big games, which means there are opportunities for Heisman moments. Nico Iamaleava, we don't know much about him. He could explode onto the scene and be that 5-star quarterback. And I mean, he was one of the highest ranked recruits in his class. Everybody was super hyped up when he went to Tennessee. I know he signed one of these massive NIL deals. So if he ends up being what people think he's going to be, this would be his breakout year and opportunity to get a bunch of momentum. And then last, I've got Cam Ward, another guy who's a superstar QB, and now he's going to be at an ACC school, projected to win 10 games this year, which means they'd be a playoff contender. Cam Ward, I loved when he was at Washington State because he just threw it all around. It was a pass-happy offense, and I think Miami has so many better receivers than what he was working with at Washington State. So big on these 3. Not sure if any of these are serious plays that I'm going to put any big money on, but I'm at least going to sprinkle $20 on each one just to see what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's 5 quarterbacks in that 1,400 range, Milroe and Howard also. And I think those 5 guys, it would be I love all 5 of those. I think they all have better chances than the top 3, frankly. Better than Ewers, Beck, and Gabriel. Maybe Gabriel's slightly better just because Oregon is seeming like a lock to make the playoffs. Obviously, There's no locks, but they look like they have a really good chance. I think they have the best odds according to the books. And we know that they have a prolific, high-powered offense that should have put up stats. But his odds are terrible in comparison to the rest of those guys. So I'm liking that 1,400 range too. I could see any of those guys winning it and wouldn't be surprised.
Well, most years, guys with, I think, between plus 200 or plus 400 and plus 5,000 odds are the ones winning it. So plus 1,400 is a range that's acceptable if I'm going to make a smart play. Moving on, we're going to talk about championship odds. Do you like any of these? These are the current ones on the right. They're covered up by the opening lines. Let's see if I don't think I'm going to place a single national championship bet this season, at least until the playoff starts, if that. Because this is the first year with the 12-team playoff, we have no clue how it's going to impact everything. You now have to play 3 games to win the national championship. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of crazy upsets in that. I want to see what the bracket is before I'm willing to do it, especially with how horrible these odds are. Yeah.
Georgia at below minus 400 to win the championship. I mean, they have to win. They have to, first of all, get a bye, which is no guarantee. And then if they don't, they have to win 3 games or 2 games, both of which neutral sites. You only get the home game in the first round. I think that this year is going to be so wide open that you're really not going to see a lot of value this early on.
Yeah, it's tricky betting on it because we don't know how it's going to play out and how these teams are going to fare as they get deep into the season playing 16 games or whatever that is. So I think if I was going to play one, I think I like the long shots, right? Like a Penn State at plus 2,200 or even
Right.
Florida State at plus 1,800, Miami plus 6,600. I think there's value there because that's a team who will probably make the playoff. So,
Utah, I think, has value. They could make the playoffs. They got a seventh-year
yep,
starter in Cam Rising, a great defense.
yep.
Yeah, I
Well,
wouldn't be looking at the top. Like people are going to say Ohio State and Georgia, and they very well might win
yeah,
the championship, but there's no value right now on them.
I agree. The value isn't there. Even with Oregon, it's not there. Texas. So I'm staying away from these, but I like the line of thinking, talking me off a ledge before I go and spray a bunch of money that I shouldn't be on those.
Now, on the other side, though, I do think there's a lot of value in these to make the playoff bets, right? Because there's so many spots open.
Yeah.
I'm looking. My prediction is going to be there's going to be 7 Big Ten and SEC teams combined, 2 ACC, 2 Big 12, and then 1 Group of 5 that guaranteed that spot. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for some of these teams. You look at like Kansas is plus 700 to make the playoffs. Zona is 1,100 to make the playoffs. Miami is above plus 200. Utah's at plus 200. I think those have a lot more value than the national championship ones.
Fair enough. I haven't looked at playoff odds, and I'm not going to bet on any of those because I think the futures I like are usually with the win totals, and that's where I want to spend my money. But if there was value in those, uh, I guess it'd be better than taking a national championship pick, since you only have to get to the playoff. You don't have to worry about that last 3 or 4 games you have to play to win it. Next up, to finish the stream off, Jake, we've got opening week lines. The only 2 big games on Saturday are Florida State and Georgia Tech, and SMU and Nevada. The SMU Nevada spread is huge, but the Florida State Georgia Tech line is reasonable in my opinion. And I say reasonable because you're on foreign land, anything can happen, as we saw with Nebraska and
I
Northwestern.
was going to say you might kick an onside kick to start off the second half when you got the lead.
Yep, anything can happen, right?
Yeah.
I think in the week 0 and 1 range last season, there were a lot of teams who you wouldn't think are going to win or wouldn't think are going to cover that somehow kept things close because obviously teams who we would think are going to be really good are trying to work things out. They have new position players in key spots, and then they have new coaching staffs or whatever it may be. Florida State, in my head, would be a hammer here. So that tells me maybe I should be looking at Georgia Tech at plus 13.
Well, I think a lot of people have the same opinion as you because this bet has now been dropped to 10.5. There has been a ton of action on Georgia Tech. The line is gone dry. I think it actually moved to 10 at one point.
Wow.
Before getting bet back up to 10.5 where it currently stands. I was kind of waiting for 9.5 and I would have jumped all over that. I understand why people are on Georgia Tech. Don't get me wrong. I think I saw a stat that's like under Brent Key, they're 12-4 against the spread as an underdog. They definitely improved over the course of last season. Florida State has a lot of turnover, right? Jordan Travis is gone. Their top 2 receivers are gone, Coleman and Walker. They lost, I think, their top running back. So, like, there's a lot of upheaval. But Florida State also had a really great transfer class. I believe it was a top 5 class, all things considered. They had a top 5 class last year. And Mike Norvell has done a really, really good job in the transfer portal. You know, you and I have had a lot of conversations about how in the last couple of years, we think that the transfer portal is actually more important than high school recruiting. And I know Nebraska maybe is focusing more on high schools, and they're doing actually a good mix of both. I know Rule said he wants to focus more on high school guys, but I do think that especially early on in the season, if you're bringing in transfers, they're more ready to play right away. So if this line is going to stay at 10.5 or 10 or 9.5, I like Florida State still.
What do you think about these big spreads early in the season? Do you like riding with the dogs, or what's kind of your lean on these situations?
I think it just depends on the matchup. You know, if there is a big spread that I like, what I love to do is bet the first half spread, because we see all the time in these games where it'd be like, you know, Alabama versus Chattanooga, and Alabama's like a 50-point favorite. And then they'll be, you know, like 27.5 in the first half, and they'll be up 35-0 at halftime. And then early in the third quarter, they start pulling their starters out. They put in the second string. In the fourth quarter, they take the second strings out, put in the third string. And now they can't score, and they give up a bullshit garbage time touchdown. And all of a sudden, they win the game 49-7, and they don't cover. So I think if it's a big spread where you like the team to actually get it done, stick with the first half, because they usually end up rolling them really early. Like very quickly, you see that there's a huge difference in talent, and it pays off. I mean, how many times have we seen Ohio State go up 21-0 in the first quarter against these random scrub teams?
Yeah, no, we've seen it. But SMU isn't Ohio State.
Correct.
OU isn't Ohio State playing Temple, right? So there's some spots here
Right.
where it's like, huh, is there value? I'm not too sure. Georgia and Clemson is a tight line, given the fact
Yep.
that Georgia's one of the best teams in the country and Clemson's kind of been falling off as of late.
I will be very heavily bet on Georgia in that game.
What
I don't get the sign at all.
what about West Virginia and Penn State? Big rivalry. West Virginia projected to be pretty good this year.
Yeah, big rivalry. I do like West Virginia and the points here in this spot. One of the things that I like about these week one games is coaches have 6, 7, 8 months to come up with game plans, right? Because once the season ends, their next opponent is Penn State. So they're focusing on that. They're coming up with plays specifically for them, especially then when you have a Super Bowl type game. Penn State is the biggest opponent West Virginia is going to play all year. It's at home. They're going to have a raucous crowd. I like the plus 10 in this spot for sure.
Where do we get something that's
I also
exciting?
just shit on Drew Aller earlier, so that helps. I don't
That
think he's
does
that
help.
great.
I think you get the first really exciting game for me, in my opinion, when you play Miami and Florida. Miami's one
Mm-hmm.
of the best teams in the country in theory. People think they're to win 10 games. Florida, 6-win range at best because their schedule's so tough.
Hey, 6 wins
Florida's
would be a miracle for Florida this year.
Florida's only a 2-point dog at home. How do you bet something like this?
So, this is another spot that seems relatively straightforward to me in that I'm taking Florida, right? Exactly as you said, Miami seems like they should be a much better team here. It seems like they should be more like a 6.5 point favorite based on, the fact that they got Cam Ward versus Graham Mertz. ETN left Florida. They've had a little bit of an upheaval in their roster. But then you added all the factors about, the tough schedule. I think what we're seeing from Florida is they're going to be super motivated because everyone's talking shit about their schedule, saying they're going to be super bad. I mean, this is a team that has, Graham Mertz has been a 4th or 5th year starter. He has played a long time. I am not a huge fan of Mario Cristobal at University of Miami. So in a short line like this, where it's like, it seems like Miami is too free, it almost never is. The books are not in the business of giving out free money. So I think this is a spot where you go with Florida and you hold your nose and you take them here.
Using that same exact logic, I would be wanting to take Miami, Ohio at Northwestern, right?
I think so. I'm not like as familiar with Miami, Ohio as those other teams. So I don't know if they had like a great transfer class or, specific guys that brought in, but agreed with Northwestern's strong season last year, bringing in a guy like Mike Wright, you would think they would be much bigger favorites here. It seems too free for Northwestern. So I think you got to lean towards Miami.
How about UTEP, 28-point dog at Nebraska?
So this one is a little bit tricky, right? Because a lot of the negative points I might make towards Nebraska here about Dylan Raiola being a freshman in his first career start, and who knows how they're going to be calling the game. They're going to be focused on maybe like because a lot of times in this first game the team isn't necessarily like we're trying to score as many points as we can. A lot of times they're trying to work on certain concepts, work on certain formations, work on certain things to actually get going then for the Big Ten schedule. And 28 points with a true freshman quarterback is a lot. But then you also have a studly defense with a lot of returning talent, and you would think that UTEP is not going to score a lot. So I think the question with this game is like, how much do we see Nebraska scoring? I would actually lean towards the under in this game, if anything, unless you think Nebraska is going to score 40 plus points.
I like it. I think those lines are too accurate, right? Like Vegas knows that Nebraska is supposed to win this game by 4 touchdowns. And because there's no read you can make, it's just will Nebraska execute perfectly or will UTEP come out fiery? I don't think this is a smart game to bet on. So this is one I would avoid. But I do like playing the under or the over if I do want to get action on it. Some other ones that I thought were interesting were like UNLV at Houston, UNLV +3. Maybe another read where UNLV, they did lose their starting quarterback. And although they do have some good players, Houston's a Big 12 school. They're at home. You would think this line's bigger, especially being a night game to kick off the season. What else? Oh, Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Notre Dame, obviously a team who is considered to be a college football national championship contender, not just a playoff contender. Mm-hmm. Texas A&M, I think a top 25 range team, but at home, at night, 3-point favorite. Maybe this is a spot where A&M could win it.
That's an interesting thing because one of the baselines as it pertains to gambling is home field advantage is worth 3 points to the book.
Yeah.
Right. So when you are the home team, they will give you 3 points. So if the game was Nebraska at UTEP, right, you could subtract 3 from Nebraska, add that 3 to UTEP. So it would really be more like Nebraska -22 on the road, which also seems about fair, right? If they were on the road, you'd say 3 touchdowns is about the expected margin of victory, put it a point higher to, deter people off Nebraska. So this Notre Dame Texas A&M game, even though it's at Texas A&M, the books are saying, actually, I think, is this neutral site or is it at Texas A&M?
That's a great question. Notre Dame A&M might be a neutral site.
Yeah, that sounds like a neutral site week 1.
Let's find out. It is. Nope, it's in College Station.
Okay. So 3-point true home field advantage, and College Station does have a good home field advantage. Like the fans get rowdy there. But either way, the books are saying that these two teams are even. Then if it were a neutral site, it would be a pick 'em. And based on what you see by the rankings, Notre Dame is higher. By the odds, Notre Dame is higher. So the books may be kind of high on Texas A&M here. I would lean towards them here at -3 at home.
Like that. I like that line of thinking. Last, I want to talk about USC and LSU. Why is LSU? Why did this open up as LSU -6.5? I know it's moved to 4.5. I got on it at USC +6 and USC +5.5. I love USC here. It's a West Coast game. Start the year off, Lincoln Riley led offense. The defense obviously got better. You're breaking in a new quarterback at LSU. I'm not sure how much Nussmeier's played, but I do know that Miller Moss started in the bowl game last year and looked great. Why is LSU a 6-point favorite traveling across the country?
It is a little confusing to me as well. I have to imagine it's just like the fact that they think USC is going to be significantly worse without Caleb Williams. But as you said, Miller Moss looked really good in the bowl game, good enough to the point that Malachi Nelson, their 5-star quarterback, transferred out. Now, he lost the job at Boise State anyway, so maybe it was other reasons why he transferred out. But Lincoln Riley, who is the transfer quarterback guru, he brought in Baker Mayfield as a transfer, Jalen Hurts as a transfer, Kyler Murray as a transfer, decided not to bring in a transfer this year. He was totally fine with Miller Moss. So I think that's about as good of a sign-off as you can have on him. LSU losing Jaden Daniels, losing their top 2 receivers. Both these teams' defenses were absolute dog shit last year. I would have loved to have this game last year. I would have taken every alt over in the book. I still probably will take the over on this just because of, again, the strength of the offenses. I'm going to need to see it from the defenses before I'm willing to jump on it. But I agree. LSU flying across the country. The game is in Vegas. Should be a little home field advantage for USC. They've been able to prepare the entire offseason for this game. Lincoln Riley personally working with Miller Moss. He should definitely take a step up. I would love to take the points here too.
It's fair enough. Well, Jake, today the whole purpose of the show was to do a little betting education, I guess. I can make my picks and plays based on what I like, but for me, it's all entertainment. It's all fun. For you, it's actually your job. You get paid to tell people what to take, and you win consistently. You send me so many bet slips, and I'm like, damn, how does Jake always know these long shot plays? And then even your straight up picks, your money line bets, you do a really good job. Betting on sports is kind of my point. So I appreciate you coming on and helping me, educating our audience. And I look forward to watching your streams this year because it's easy to watch when it's on Twitch.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we had a great season last year. I'm hoping for an even better season this year. And I hope to see a lot of you guys in my Twitch chat, chopping it up, winning some bets, and having some fun with us.
Yeah, well, I'll be there. When's your next live stream?
Next live stream will be tomorrow. Weekdays, I try to go live around 4 o'clock Central Time. We'll see. And then Saturday, I will be live virtually all day, probably starting around 8:30 in the morning. Talking sports all day, watching the games, having fun.
I love it. All right, Jake. Well, thank you for coming on the channel. I look forward to talking football with you all season long because now we're finally freaking back. But until next time, thank you for being here. I will see you guys in the next one, and go Big Red.